Every isekai hero gets a cheat code, but our protagonist, Arcs, woke up as the ultimate cosmic joke. A literal NPC with zero plot relevance. The paradox is that this powerless background character didn't just fight the final boss, he saved her, fundamentally changing the destiny of the terrifying villainess Eleanor Ansiness. How did the universe's ultimate zero become its greatest game changer? I'm Narumi, and we're breaking down the power of the overlooked. The Celestia Kingdom Otome game was huge, known for its deep storyline and numerous possible endings. Yet one character was the constant source of dread. Eleanor Ansiness, the infamous girl who was guaranteed to commit outrageous and horrible misdeeds. She was the final boss, the epitome of malice, and the root of all evil. Here is the cosmic joke. Arxley Fort, our current protagonist, was a complete non-entity in all those story branches. His name was never mentioned. He had no role. He was, to put it plainly, a glorified filler character, an absolute NPC. He should have been comforted by this obscurity. Most isekai protagonists are handed the cheat code of past life knowledge, which makes them instantly strong and attractive, the standard power fantasy. But Arx is operating on hard mode. The world rules seem to have stripped him of his memories, leaving him only with the vague recollection that he lived in Japan. This isn't an OP reincarnation. This is an NPC challenge run, where he has to improvise everything. He's just an orphan living a quiet life, genuinely wondering why he was even reincarnated here if he wasn't going to get amazing magic or a fun school experience. This perspective is refreshing. Instead of whining about his boring role, he decides to simply enjoy the new world for now, believing that even a powerless background character will eventually get a great opportunity. Cut to the next day, and we see Arx practicing with wooden swords. He effortlessly defeats his opponent, a villager who quickly surrenders. He's managed to defeat all the adults in the village, and the village children look up to him as a hero. He plays the part, giving the kids encouraging words. This is classic low-stakes isekai boredom. Arx's inner monologue reveals the truth. He was only training out of sheer boredom since there were no online games in this world. He literally optimized the only physical activity available, a bizarre testament to the power of a gamer's focus when redirected toward real-life skills. He figures this unexpected swordsmanship is only good for fighting minor monsters, certainly nothing that makes him a future knight. But the kind, gentle director of the orphanage sees potential. He praises Arx, convinced that he is destined to become a great knight. Arx is skeptical, a knight, just an ordinary orphan like him. The director insists he can and then reveals the real reason he came. He has a favor to ask. The gravity in the director's tone immediately hooks Arx's attention. The scene shifts dramatically. Arx's heart is hammering as he stands in a ridiculously luxurious mansion, feeling completely out of place for a villager. He asks the director if they should really be there. The director assures him that someone important truly wishes to see him. The door opens, and in walks Count Eleanor Ansiness, the imposing and wealthy lord of the region. Arx is duly impressed by the Count's title and nervously introduces himself. The Count, having heard of Arx's impressive capabilities, which we know were just the product of desperate boredom, had an important, bizarre favor to ask. With a serious yet gentle tone, the Count asks Arx to become none other than the friend of his daughter. Arx is completely blindsided, an orphan summoned just to be a noble's friend. The Count explains his daughter has a problematic nature, leading Arx to assume the classic villainous traits, illness or hateful personality. The Count ushers in his daughter. She is stunningly beautiful with delicate features, dark flowing hair, and an elegant, somber black dress. She introduces herself as Eleanor Ansiness. The second her name hits Arx, the entire narrative flips. That moment, hearing the name of the final boss, is the absolute pivot point of his life. Arx is no longer an NPC passively waiting for the story to end. He's an NPC suddenly shoved into a mandatory story quest: befriend and save the infamous Villainess. This is the ultimate thematic hook of the story. The central conflict is set. Can an unassuming background character change the tragic fate of the game's main antagonist, the very girl known for committing dreadful deeds? Arx can't help but question the wisdom of befriending someone so terrifying. The Count, blissfully unaware of the narrative apocalypse he's just triggered, encourages them to take a stroll in the garden. As they walk along the breathtaking pathways, Arx is unsettled. Eleanor is indeed captivatingly beautiful. A girl clothed entirely in black with dark eyes and hair, radiating allure despite her absolute lack of expression. He recalled the Count saying she was his age, yet she seemed cold and distant. Suddenly, Eleanor stops dead in her tracks, startling Arx. Concerned, he asks if something is wrong. She turns, her gaze cold and unreadable, and delivers the first psychological blow. Just as I suspected, you have no desire to be my friend. She reveals she understands everything. The reason is simple. He does not wish to associate with someone as cursed as her. This is the raw, devastating psychology of the rejected villainess. She's been shunned so often she preemptively pushes people away, certain they will only hate her. Memories flood in, being shunned by society, the whispers that everything she touched became tainted, the cruel remarks about her eyes having no light, and her constant black dress. She explains that she only received glares filled with hatred and disdain. Arx is struck silent, shaken by the reality of her isolated existence. She confesses she had grown accustomed to this, as it was the only way people ever reacted to her. Then, without warning, she demonstrates her power upon a cluster of plants. Arx is utterly stunned by the sight. She holds up a wilted flower, and Kate told him to witness for himself. Before his eyes, its color drained further, shriveling into lifelessness. Everything she touched, she explained, withered and died. Not only plants, but people as well. Meeting his gaze with an unflinching stare, she declared this to be her true nature. And now, he could finally understand. He had just seen the raw demonstration of her power. Everything Eleanor Ansiness touched, she killed. Arx stood deep in thought, grappling with the devastating revelation that she bore this terrifying burden. He wondered if he could truly save her, if he could alter her fate and the tragic ending he knew awaited her in the game. Slowly, a profound conviction began to settle in his heart. Perhaps this burden, this precise moment with the cursed villainess, was the very reason he had been brought into this world. If he could change the course of the story and stay by her side, maybe the world could achieve a happy ending for everyone, including Eleanor. With a newfound resolve, Arx solidified his determination. He realized he must strive toward a future where no one was left unhappy. He told Eleanor that to him, she was not ugly in the slightest. Quite the opposite, he insisted. She was breathtakingly beautiful. His blunt honesty immediately caught her off guard. Her cheeks flushed with a deep, furious blush, a genuine expression he had never seen before. She nervously admitted that while she appreciated his kindness, she knew her powers could still harm others. Arx acknowledged that risk but insisted there had to be a better way for her terrifying abilities to be used. This is the ultimate thematic hook. Arx, the NPC, is not just accepting her curse, he's challenging the game's logic. He reached out and touched the withered flower she held. Before their eyes, the lifeless bloom blossomed back to full, vibrant life. It was a miracle that shattered her reality. He assured her that even if she did hurt someone, he would find a way to set things right, speaking with sincerity and determination. He asked her to accept his hand in friendship. The next scene opens on a nightmare, a flashback to the cruelty Eleanor endured. She was subjected to constant discrimination, hearing harsh comments calling her a crow and a demon. In the dream, the distant image of her own mother appeared, staring at her with severity, coldly telling her to stop looking at her with those eyes. Eleanor's heart sank. She began to weep, begging forgiveness, simply for having been born. She awoke suddenly, pulled from the terrifying vision by Arx, who gently asked if she was all right. He explained they had been speaking comfortably in her room when she had suddenly fallen asleep from exhaustion. Without a word, Eleanor looked at Arx and then broke down, crying inconsolably like a small child. Arx felt completely uneasy. He was uncertain how to respond to such raw emotion from a girl, so he simply chose the only thing he knew how to do. He embraced her, giving her soft pats to soothe her distress. Gradually, she calmed down. In that fragile moment, she came to understand that she finally had a friend she could trust. She had previously worried that staying with him would make him unhappy, but he insisted it was the complete opposite, that being with her would bring him great happiness. He addressed her fear that she might eventually hurt him. Arcs offered a profound piece of philosophy. No one in this life leaves without having hurt someone, and that such a thing is normal. He then held her tightly, declaring that he only wanted her, leaving her deeply astonished. She apologized for crying, but he told her never to apologize, assuring her that his chest would always be there for her whenever she needed it. Eleanor laughed softly, thanking him. Arcs simply replied that it was only what any friend would do. She opened her heart, admitting she never had an ally, let alone a friend, which is why it was difficult to believe someone like Arcs was truly by her side. Arcs gently explained that feeling was normal, that friendship could take many forms, and that communication requires practice and repetition. After this incredible, heartfelt, emotional breakthrough, things got interesting. A few weeks passed, and as Arcs came to understand her true nature, Eleanor's attitude changed drastically. This is the insight. Having finally received genuine, unconditional acceptance, the deeply traumatized girl immediately shifted into protective, possessive overdrive. She became very intense, constantly demanding his attention, demonstrating those early yandere traits we saw in the flash-forward. She became upset because he wasn't listening to her, irritably asking if anything was more important than her question. Arcs, recognizing the behavior for what it was, gently took her hand and, in a tender voice, told her there was nothing more important to him than her. She blushed furiously, metaphorically smoking from sheer embarrassment. Arcs, inwardly amused, joked that he was simply too handsome and could easily take advantage of such a quality. Her mood instantly softened. She asked him which clothes would suit her best, an innocent question that was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was her father, Lord Adalbert, asking to speak with Arcs. He apologized to his daughter, explaining he needed to borrow her friend for a short while. As expected, Eleanor looked furious. With her usual tsundere attitude, she told him she didn't care since Arcs was already distracted anyway. Arcs, trying to placate his easily angered friend, turned back and whispered, delicately in her ear, that whatever clothes she wore would always look beautiful on her no matter what. This made her blush even harder. The Count then explained to Arcs that the request he had made was approved. Starting next week, Arcs would officially become a member of the household as a butler. Arcs thanked him, confirming he was comfortable with the arrangement, since it saved him the trouble of traveling back and forth and guaranteed him a job. Lord Adalbert was genuinely impressed by the remarkable capability of a boy as young as 7 years old. He told Arcs that this competence was precisely the reason he had chosen him to be his daughter's friend in the first place. Arcs firmly confirmed his acceptance. Arcs left the room, ready to take on his new role. Eleanor was waiting impatiently, sulking through the crack of the door. She furiously reproached him for taking so long, assuming he was having too much fun talking to her father. Arcs, now dressed in his new butler attire, apologized respectfully. He addressed her as Milady, kneeling before her with knightly courtesy. He solemnly declared that from that moment on she should allow him to serve her as her devoted assistant. The mansion was transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Arcs worked briskly, moving efficiently as he coordinated with the maids to ready the estate for a grand occasion. The task was exhausting, but his determination never faltered. This hectic scene is the last glimpse of their life before the time jump. A shift in time is immediately revealed. 3 years had passed since Arcs first entered the household. Now, at only 10 years old, he carried himself with a composure far beyond his age. What made the moment striking was that Eleanor herself was soon to reach her 10th birthday, a milestone that in this world was celebrated with all the grandeur befitting nobility. 10 was not simply a number here, it was a formal passage, a recognition of growth, and families of status spared no expense to mark such an occasion. Everyone in the household had been swept into the fever of preparation. Arcs, however, quietly admitted to himself that this would be his very first time attending a noble's banquet, and the thought stirred a rare unease within him. While he adjusted a set of ornate decorations on a banquet table, a cheerful voice broke through the flurry of tasks. A maid named Nanai, a bright girl who often assisted him during the busier hours of the day, approached. She thanked Arx earnestly for his tireless efforts, telling him that everything was fully prepared for tomorrow's grand celebration because of his guidance. Arx responded with modesty, explaining internally that despite being only 10 years old, he was somehow already overseeing the orchestration of an entire noble gathering. This is the insight. Most of his contributions were simple, practical suggestions carried over from the common sense of his previous life, things he considered basic logistics. Yet to those around him, each instruction seemed like a stroke of genius, a mark of intelligence far beyond his years. The real cheat code in Isekai isn't a power-up. It's just applying modern efficiency to a medieval setting. Their praises embarrassed him, but he accepted them with quiet grace, knowing that none of this was truly for himself. It was all for Eleanor. This was to be her first extravagant party since their meeting, and Arx wished above all to see her smile radiant with delight. For that, he was willing to endure any fatigue. Later, when the final preparations were settled, Arx retreated to the training grounds. Drawing upon his innate talent, he conjured a blade of stone, its surface rough yet sharp, and set about his exercises. His strikes echoed across the courtyard until his arms trembled with exhaustion. Rather than resting conventionally, he restored himself with a surge of magic, a display that left Nanai, who had secretly followed to watch, utterly astonished. Once satisfied with his practice, Arx decided to call it a day. But just as he was about to leave, a soft, familiar voice reached his ears. Turning, he saw Eleanor standing nearby, her figure framed by the evening light. She confessed she had been waiting for some time, though he had not noticed her presence. Concern flickered in his eyes, and he scolded her gently, warning that she could catch a cold out here. To this she answered with a mischievous smirk, saying that if she did, he would simply have to warm her himself. There was a pause between them, heavy yet tender, before she accused him of being far too busy lately. He countered calmly, reminding her that they had only spoken just the other day. Suspecting she was exaggerating, she huffed, muttering half to herself that he belonged to her, before quickly correcting her words. She declared instead that as her servant, he was obliged to remain constantly by her side. Arx apologized sincerely, explaining that his business was all for her sake, for tomorrow's grand celebration. Hearing this, her expression softened. She admitted the importance of the day, conceding that it couldn't be helped, though a faint trace of dissatisfaction lingered in her gaze. As they began walking back to the mansion together, she suddenly asked if he ever felt lonely. The question caught him off guard. Arx shook his head, explaining with honesty that he never felt alone, for Lord Adalbert and the other servants had always treated him kindly. At his words, Eleanor's mood shifted sharply. A jealous glint lit her eyes, her lips tightening as though his contentment with others unsettled her in ways she herself could not explain. She turned away, masking her emotions beneath a fragile facade before Arx could notice fully. Finally, a small sneeze escaped her, revealing the cost of her stubbornness in lingering outside. The day of the celebration dawned at last. The mansion's grand hall sparkled with chandeliers and gilded decorations, its walls alive with the murmur of noble guests. Lord Adalbert, standing tall and dignified, welcomed the gathering, yet when he leaned toward Arx, his words grew sharp and commanding. He ordered the boy to keep his eyes open and to eliminate anyone who dared draw too close to his daughter. Arx nodded without hesitation, his youthful face set with a rare steel. As the evening unfolded, he noticed two figures lingering near the edge of the hall, their movements suspicious and their eyes scanning Eleanor with unnerving focus. Arx's gaze locked onto them, sharp and unyielding. When they realized he had marked them, unease flickered across their faces. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the two men vanished into the crowd, leaving Arx with the chilling certainty that danger was nearer than anyone realized. At last, the birthday girl made her entrance. Eleanor appeared at the top of the staircase, her figure framed by the soft glow of chandeliers. She wore a dress of delicate black silk embroidered with silver threads that shimmered as she moved. The transformation left Arx momentarily breathless. This is the thematic hook. She looked radiant, almost otherworldly. Arx could hardly believe this was the same gloomy, withdrawn girl he had met 3 years ago. Her once expressionless face now carried a quiet dignity, her beauty undeniable. For a brief moment, the entire hall seemed to fall into silence as every guest turned to stare at her. Arx thought to himself how incredible it was that a child could grow and change so much in just a few short years. He forced his composure to remain intact, reminding himself that his duty today was not to indulge in admiration, but to oversee the smooth flow of the event. His thoughts were interrupted by Nanai, who approached him and whispered that he had been summoned. Eleanor was calling for him to take his place as her guard for the evening. Arx frowned slightly at the request, sensing it was less about duty and more about her insistent need to keep him close. As he stepped forward, he became acutely aware of the weight of countless eyes on him. The nobles whispered among themselves, their stares sharp and prying, trying to pierce through his very being. They silently questioned who this boy was and why he was standing so close to the young lady of the house. Eleanor broke the silence with her characteristic bluntness. She declared that Arx was her attendant, though she pointed out with irritation that he was rarely by her side. She insisted that Arx was not just any servant. Then, with a sudden and heartfelt announcement, she revealed something that startled the crowd. She declared that today was not only her birthday, but Arx's as well. They were the same age, yet unlike her, his birthday had never been celebrated. Her words rang through the hall, catching Arx off guard. A warmth spread through his chest as he muttered his thanks, his cheeks burning faintly at her unexpected kindness. He realized then just how much she had changed from the pessimistic, self-loathing girl of the past, and the thought filled him with both pride and a quiet affection. But even in this touching moment, Arx's sharp eyes remained vigilant. Out of the corner of his vision, he noticed something that made his heart tighten. It was the same two suspicious men from earlier. For a story about an NPC who never existed, the Villainess and the Butler delivers some serious emotional weight. The psychological depth of Eleanor's trauma and Arx's absolute resolve to defy destiny is just top tier. But tell me in the comments, do you think Arx can keep her from going full yandere in the next arc? If you loved this deep dive, smash that like button and subscribe for more Narumi analysis. Seriously, go buy the original to support the author.